Hey everyone, thanks for joining this Momentus event with Jen Padalecki and author Elizabeth Gonzalez James. A few quick notes. Jen will be taking some of your questions from the audience, so use the Q&A box. I believe, let's see, make sure chat is open. Would love to hear from you all and where you're from. So we're just opening up chat now. Amazing. So Jen will be taking some of your questions from the audience, so use that Q&A box to send us your questions about the book or writing process or the process of writing books, whatever you like. We are here for both book lovers and authors. If you send a question and also raise your hand, we may be able to bring you into the Zoom as well toward the end of the program. Just use that raise your hand button at the bottom of Zoom there. So, I mean, without much further ado, let's just get into this now. Jen, I'm going to pull you in here. Here we go. Yay!
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Good morning. Happy
Good
Monday.
morning. Happy Monday. Oh gosh, wow, it's Monday.
Sure is. I'm gonna duck out, but we read this book. It was amazing. It's exactly as it was described. We're excited to get into it. So I'm gonna let you get into it with Elizabeth James
Can't wait.
Gonzalez, and we're gonna get going.
Perfect. Let's do it. All right.
Hi.
Hi, Elizabeth. So we are speaking today with Elizabeth Gonzalez James about her newest book, The Bullet Swallower. If you haven't picked it up, please go pick one up. Go buy two. Buy it for your friends and family. This book was absolutely extraordinary. I was blown away, and it was such a wild and beautiful ride. It's an adventure through the deserts of Texas with a story about a law-breaking man trying to do right by his family. And Bullet Swallower is equal parts a stunning family saga, magical realism Western that examines the debts that we pay for our ancestors and whether it's possible to be better than those who have come before us. So I want to thank you for this beautiful read, and I'm excited to jump and delve into it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words, and thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, so excited. Well, thank you for your beautiful book. So I know that you talked and touched about this a little bit in your author's note, but can you discuss a little bit about what the inspiration was about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned in my author's note, it's loosely based on the true story of my great-grandfather. He was a bandito, and the entire story that I heard, it's like one sentence long. He was put in jail in Houston. He broke out, was chased down by the Texas Rangers. They shot him in the face and left him for dead, but he lived. And eventually he made it back to his family in Mexico. And that was like the entirety of the legend that I knew. And I really wanted to turn it into a novel. And I really wanted to write a Texas novel. I wanted to write something that was set along the Texas-Mexico border. And I thought, okay, so this is it. And this is, going to be my chance to talk about all this stuff. But that story of being shot by the Texas Rangers was a little thin on the details. So I had to obviously fill it out with a whole bunch of other stuff and lots of historical research. But yeah, that little kernel was the genesis of the story.
Oh, what a great kernel to have, and what a great mythological story to have in your family. What a interesting and beautiful inspiration at the same time. And also knowing that, you come from this great myth. And one of the things that I just love are the threads about the family and how that kernel is woven throughout our family, with each generation. Did you learn anything new in that process when you were doing your research, or was it kind of just limited to that one kernel and you kind of had to elaborate and create a world on your own?
I did a really deep genealogical deep dive into my dad's side of the family. My dad was born in Mexico, but was raised in the United States. And I didn't really know too much about his family. when I would ask him who were our ancestors, he would just say like they were ranchers, they were Indians, whatever. He was completely uninterested in family history. So I started digging, and very luckily, Latinos, Mexican Americans are super into genealogy. And so very quickly, I was able to tap into work that other people had done, relatives of mine. I found them on ancestry.com. And I was able to go back to like the 1500s, basically, as soon as people came over from Spain. They kept such incredible records. And then even before that, I was able to go back a little bit further, and I found out that some of my ancestors were royal, like back in Spain. And once you find royalty anywhere in your family tree, it's like the jackpot, because they wrote literally everything down about everything, going all the way back to like the times of King David. I mean, it gets into fantasy at some point.
Yeah.
But like you go back far enough and it's like so and so son of Thor and Freya,
Right. Rode on unicorns through the
exactly. Yeah. And yeah, so that all of that was super surprising. One thing that I found out was some hundreds of years back, I had some ancestors in Mexico who owned gold mines. And I don't think you have to know too much about the history of mining in Latin America, but working conditions were very bad. And the people who owned those mines were like really, really bad people who treated their employees just terribly. And it's funny because when I found that out, this is just the screwy way my brain works. My first thought was, oh, if anything bad ever happens to me, I had it coming for whatever my ancestors did to those poor people back in the hundreds of years ago in the gold mines. And that was kind of, the inspiration for looking at this fictitious family, and then sort of saying like, can I pin all of human evil on this one family? Can I like make them the most despicable people that ever lived? And they were responsible for killing Emperor Moctezuma during the Spanish conquest of Tenochtitlan. They were responsible for, X, Y, and Z, Cain and Abel. And I'm not saying anything that like my family is that terrible. We're just a normal family, but it was a really cool like literary experiment, moral experiment that was all founded a little bit in truth, in stuff that I found out through my research.
Yeah, well, it was beautiful. I mean, first of all, how fun. I love ancestry.com and going back and finding those, there's certain, going back and looking at photos or even hobbies of certain ancestors and being like, wow, that's really interesting how connected we are without actually having spoken or being present in the same time frame. Which brings me to, one of the stories in the book, within the book, about this sort of non-linear way of looking at time, and it's almost like overlapping and it's circular, and it's almost how we right our ancestors' wrongs. I mean, that's sort of seen within the book. You start with this family and he's pretty despicable, and yet through his ancestors who are equally like flawed, it seems to be a little less, but circularly the beginning of the story almost, beginning and the end almost meet. I felt like it was righting the wrongs that the first Antonio had started, and with Jaime and Antonio, it was like finishing that or righting those wrongs, if that makes sense. I'm probably not doing a great job of explaining it. And I just love that sort of circular lens of time. I just thought that was such a great concept, because we think of things in such linear terms, but I don't know if you can kind of suspend space and time and look at it in that way, and we're all kind of like part of this energy. And
yeah well, so
really
I don't know a ton about physics, and I'm not going to pretend that I do, but I think that increasingly physicists are starting to question the way that we perceive time as occurring, on a timeline. I think that increasingly physicists are starting to see that time is doesn't move in a line. It might be more of like a simultaneity, so everything is always happening all at once. And so for one thing, like, linear time might be false. Okay, and so then if I'm like, linear time might be false, and certainly it is in a novel, because in a novel you get to expand sideways. You get to talk about two things happening at the same time. You get to talk about things happening in the future and the past. So then why stick to linear time? Why not make time a spiral or a circle or anything that you want it to be? I read this great quote somewhere in my research. I want to say it was Carlos Fuentes. He said, of course, in Mexico, time moves in a spiral. How else can you explain that, we live in skyscrapers in the city, but out in the country, people are still living the same way that they've lived for 5,000 years. And so there's little things like that I'm like, yeah, like there are people in the United States who are living the same way that they have lived for hundreds of years. And I think that's really fascinating that like time moves at different speeds for certain people. For some people, it's very fast. For some people, it's not as fast. And then two, like, if you start digging into your family history and maybe you find out that you had ancestors who were slaves or who, had this or this, or who were Holocaust survivors, and you go and visit like where they were from, it does, I think, feel very much like you're closing a circle. Like somehow you are honoring those who came before by seeing like where they grew up or where they were taken. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think we do intuitively feel this like sense of time as a loop and like being able to close it at some point.
Yeah,
Does that make
absolutely.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to bring it, I don't want to get too personal, but my grandmother, her side of the family came from Louisiana. We lived in California and we moved around as kids, but mainly grew up for the first part of, till I was 13 in California. And my grandmother had moved from Louisiana and had really just spoken horribly about the South, I think, just because at the time she was very poor and it was like she had moved to California and it was almost like looked down upon. So I think she grew up with this sort of sense that it was less than, or the way she grew up. And so that sort of thread was kind of, brought to me, but I was always so curious about it, but we couldn't ask about it, and it was quite interesting. And then I ended up marrying a Texan, which I never, wildly, and moved, he is from San Antonio. We loved Austin, ended up in Austin, and just loved the city, and moved on our own, because we wanted to. And I started digging with ancestry.com and come to find out I have more Texas blood, so to speak, in ancestry than he does, because my ancestors were all over. It's just wild to think like how you end up going along those footsteps that your ancestors did that you never thought you would, or they never wanted you to do or something. And I don't know if it's coincidence or if it's like part of the destiny of it, or I don't know. I think that magical realism component and in that part of your story is just, it's so compelling, and thinking that we have both choice and, what there's the part of life that we can't control, and they sort of weave in and out. And I love it. And I also, to me, there was also a part of the book where it almost felt like a hero's journey, which I am so drawn to. I love a hero's journey. I love all of the side characters, and I love the experience and what the hero learns out of it. And it's such an unexpected hero. And I love that they're so flawed. And I ended up just loving him, even though he was so despicable at times. Can you talk a little bit about writing your characters and if you had a favorite one?
Yeah. thank you for all of that. No, yeah, it is very much a hero's journey, and that was very top of mind as I was writing it. And I think like the hero's journey just tends to be how we not just storytell, but I think also how we remember things. If you if I ask you, what was it like getting over this particularly challenging time in your life? Like the way that you tell that story is usually going to be some version of the hero's journey. You got a call to action, you answered the call, you encountered trials, but then eventually you overcame it, and now you have the knowledge that you obtained through those trials. And then, yeah, writing the characters, it took a long time. It was really hard for me to write Antonio authentically because I'm not a man. I'm not a person who's prone to violence. I've never even fired a gun. Like I knew nothing about this guy's life. And I'm from Texas, but I grew up in the suburbs. So my childhood was, it was like King of the Hill. It wasn't like Lonesome Dove or anything. So I really, really had to work hard to figure out that character. And I did a lot of reading about people who are violent professionally, so basically criminals and soldiers, like what it feels like to kill somebody, what that does to you, and how you can make peace with that and live with that. I spent a lot of time on some of the darker corners of Reddit, which like I really would not ever recommend. I had to do a lot of research into what it was like living at that time period, and that helped a lot too. So, it was Mexico in the 1800s, and to a certain extent Mexico today, rigidly patriarchal, very Catholic. The man is the head of the household, and what he say goes, or what he says goes. And so all of those things, like the historical research and then the imagination, just kind of coalesced into this character. And as for my favorite character, I really love Peter, the English gentleman. He was somebody who just kind of popped into the story, and I was like, oh, get him out of here. He doesn't make any sense. This is ridiculous. I can't have this random like English guy in the middle of the book. But then I was like, oh, but I really love him. What if he just sticks around? And I think he was my editor's favorite character too. And I've heard a lot of people really love Peter. So
I loved him. He provided such a beautiful insight, to their relationship and friendship. I think he really helped humanize, or not humanize, but just having that balance was just really a wonderful experience to see and feel, and have this sidekick who was like a ride or die,
Yeah. And he provides a little comic relief too. And I never wanted it to be the case in the novel where like all the Mexicans were the good guys and all the white people were the bad guys, because that's not what I believe, and that's not how history was, and that's not the story I wanted to tell. And Peter's not without his, colonialist, racist sort of tendencies.
Right.
But I think his biggest flaw is obliviousness.
He's not like a privilege.
Person. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And I love how that was highlighted, and it was done in such a beautiful and comical way. I feel like sometimes you read a story and it's very like the trope is there and you're like, aha, I got it. But like the way that they were woven in was really beautiful, so that you could see the good and the bad on both sides. And I thought it was great that, yes, he's very flawed and very entitled, but so funny and kind. I feel like he deserves his own story. Like I would love to know where he came from, and what, to be in those situations, and be with like that rough crowd, and yet like dip in and out. And I would love to know more about, if you ever write about Peter, let me know.
I will. Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely loved him. So I'm going to go back to some of my questions, because I know people have a lot of questions. I really love learning about routines and writing routines. Do you have a specific routine that you stick with?
I'm starting to evolve into that. So I started writing at the same time that I started having kids. I have two
Oh my
kids,
gosh.
13 and 10. And so for a really long time, I was just writing in between like nap times or when they were at preschool or a little bit older when
Mhm.
they were at elementary school. Now that they're a little bit older, their schedules are more predictable. Also, now that it's not COVID, um, because that I was just starting to hit my stride too, right? In
Wow.
2020, and then like everybody ended up in the house. And anyways, so I
Super
try,
productive.
yes. So I try to write in the mornings I just do emails and chores and exercise. And then I have lunch, and then from like 12:30 to 5 or 6, that's writing.
Mm,
And I try to do that Monday through Friday. So I just treat it like a job. So I
mm.
do like, the admin stuff in the morning and then the creative stuff in the afternoon. Um, and I've been doing that for a few months, and it's been working really well. So I think I'm gonna continue that because I think my brain works better after 12 o'clock too. Like in the morning, I can't do a whole lot.
I'm like that too. I
Yeah.
understand. Is there anything that you really hope that readers take away from The Bullet Swallower?
I hope that they feel that it's a hopeful book. There's a lot of darkness in it. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of sadness, but I believe that it has a hopeful ending. And I hope that people take that away from it because I am a really hopeful person. And I do believe, that it sounds corny to say, and especially nowadays when there are so many horrible things happening, but I do believe the best in people. I do believe that everybody carries a light inside of them. It's just that a lot of times they choose to ignore it or don't know it's there. But yeah, I am a hopeful person, and I hope that people get hope from this book and get some sense of grace without getting like super religious about it. But I grace is a very important topic to me, and I think I'm going to be writing about it quite a bit. And it was a huge concept to me as I was writing this book. I got a lot of inspiration from Gilead by Marilyn Robinson,
Mm,
and so I hope people take that away.
yeah, absolutely. I know it definitely conveyed for me. I felt very hopeful and beautiful, and um, I'm sure that your readers feel the same.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I'm going to get to readers' questions, but really fast. Is there what's next for you, and where can people follow you, and more of your work? Do you have more? Do you have a book coming out soon, or are you working on anything?
Yeah, so I'm working on a few things. One thing I'm doing is I'm adapting this book for film. So got
Amazing.
hopefully everything works out because as I'm sure you know, these things can fall apart 10 ways till Sunday.
I
But
know.
but yes, the option for the film was picked up, and I was hired a screenwriter, which is terrifying because I've never done this before. But I'm trying my best,
You
and
got
yeah, thank you.
it.
So I'm doing that, and I actually had quite a bit. Excuse me, uh, frog in my throat.
You're fine.
I had quite a bit of material that I actually cut out of the book. I had about 250 pages that had to go because it was just like the story was getting too crazy. I had actually too many timelines and too much going on. And so I'm taking one little piece of that and turning it into a standalone novel. It's not going to be a sequel, and
Mm,
it's not going to be magical realism, but it's going to be set in Mexico City in the 1960s, and it's called Letter to My Husband's Mistress, and it's a letter from the wife of an actor to her husband's mistress. And through the letter, we're going to see that the two women actually have a lot more in common than meets the eye. So,
oh, that's beautiful. I bet it's the timeline as well. Like what a gorgeous and such a beautiful city. I can just see it. It's also, I'm sure, another beautiful screenplay.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, good luck. I mean, I know we are in the throes of a couple ourselves, and it is no small feat, and that's huge and exciting, and we can't wait to watch your movie.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I guess is that our cue that we have to?
Well, we've got a few questions here, and don't forget you can use the Q&A box, but we've got some if you want to load those up too. I can give them to you.
Is it in the webinar chat? Sorry.
Yeah, I can grab them for you here. So
yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. First of all,
I don't know if you've seen all of the comments, but everyone is just loving, and so many great comments about the Bullet Swallower.
Oh, that's very sweet. I'm very bad at being able to read and talk at the same time.
Same. I'm just seeing them all. So that's why thankfully Charlie's piping in.
No worries, I've got you. Well, first of all, we have kind of an unspoken rule here that if there's a pet that appears on screen, he's asking, what is your kitty's name? That's our first question.
Oh, is there a cat over here?
There was a gray one in the background.
Oh, yeah, that's Cersei. So my husband and I both thought that we had fed her this morning, and she was on me the whole day, and I was like, what is your deal? And then finally, like 5 seconds before I came on here, I figured out, oh, nobody fed her. So she doesn't actually want me, she just wants food.
Nice. Yeah. Classic. Good.
Like our house.
All right, back to books. Well, the one question that was given was Laura asks, how has your extended family reacted to the book, given that it's so personal and so historical in nature?
Yeah, so my dad's side of the family, yeah, it was funny. The day that it came out, like all these cousins suddenly popped up on Instagram in my DMs. And it's been so fun to reconnect with them, because these are cousins that some of them I literally haven't seen since I was like 5 years old. And yeah, it's been wonderful. They're really excited about the book. They're really excited that like our ancestors, getting the authorial treatment. And no, it's been really fun. I'm a little estranged from my dad's family, and so this has actually been a wonderful way to get back in touch with everybody. And yeah, so I've been really thankful for that.
Amazing. Another question, a bit more writerly, was how did you make the decision to go for magical realism as opposed to like a straight, history or historical fiction style?
Yeah, so I started researching this in 2015, and I started writing it in 2016. So it's been a really, really long time. And I genuinely don't remember 100% of like the deliberation that went into that decision. And unfortunately, I feel like the answer is just that I thought it would be cool. And I love magical realism. I love weird stuff. Kurt Vonnegut and Borges and George Saunders, Italo Calvino, those are all my favorite writers. And I think I just wanted to do something weird and just see what that would be like. And I really liked it. And it also seemed to fit with the material and the time and the place. Like the border's weird and spooky, and Catholicism can get really spooky. And so all of that sort of combined, and I feel like it worked. I mean, when I was a kid, like we used to tell stories of La Llorona, the ghost who will drown you if you get too close to the river, or the chupacabra and stuff like that. So it was culturally appropriate as well.
Beautiful. Well, thank you both so much. This is a great book, and obviously everybody go out and grab it if you haven't read it already. Got it right here, The Bullet Swallower.
We'll post in stories as well for
to
the purchase.
So yeah, and thank you, Jen, for sharing your love of books again and supporting authors. And thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. And thank you to everyone who bought a ticket and supported Feeding America, a world-renowned nonprofit here in the U.S., helping in the fight against hunger by fueling families' futures through food. Fueling families' future. That's a lot of alliteration.
It's a lot, yeah.
Through food, yeah. But yeah, go follow Elizabeth on Instagram. We've been posting a link there in the chat. And we'll make sure it's out and about, but very excited. Thank you both so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.